it's a quiet confidence. You see it in certain people. Like you meet somebody and never talk about martial arts, never talk about, but you can just look at them and go, that's not somebody to be trifled with.
Mhm.
There's just that they have a look on their face, not of anger or, aggression, but
Mhm.
I am confident.
Mhm.
It's just a certain look. I usually say it about the way people walk. You can
Mhm.
tell a lot about a person's athletic skill by the way they walk.
Mhm.
And you can see like that person moves really well.
Mhm.
That person has,
Mhm.
eyes up, kind of chin down a little bit. You're like, that person probably has taken some stuff and knows how to fight. And
Mhm.
you can just see on their face, like, no, I've done this before. And
Mhm.
how they act when things start to escalate. So before it escalates into a fight, you can see people who are, they might just start looking over in that direction. Other people are like, oh my God, what's going on? And you just see a difference in how people react when things start going sideways.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Conversations from the Hearth. Today, we are joined again by Mr. Steve Ruddock from Nick Cerio's Kenpo Karate out in Bellingham, Massachusetts. Mr. Ruddock, thanks for coming back on the show.
Thanks for the invite. Happy to do it.
Sir.
So yeah, topic for today is we want to talk about the self-defense mindset, and that can mean a lot of different things.
Yes, sir.
Jesse, what's our first question for Mr. Ruddock today?
Yes, sir. So the self-defense mindset. Question number one, what is the self-defense mindset? How do we define that? Here at our school, maybe at your school, everybody has maybe a different view of this. So we're curious to hear what yours is.
Yeah, so I define self-defense very differently depending on where I am.
Yes, sir.
So in a general conversation with people, I will say, yeah, we do self-defense, but it's a term I don't like. It implies that you're defending yourself. Something has already gone horribly wrong in any of the soft skills that you might have. So it's not a term I like to use in the dojo. It's something I'll use with kids just because it keeps it very simple and it's something that people understand what you're talking about. If you say self-protection, they'll be like, well, what's that? Or they'll have some strange idea of what that means. So I feel like self-defense is kind of a bucket term that people use for a lot of soft skills and then, yes, some martial arts skills that people might have. So you might learn self-defense techniques. So when something does go horribly wrong, what do we do in those situations? But for me, it's more about the soft skills that you have, awareness. There's a great quote by I think it's Rory Miller, where he says it's better to avoid than to run, better to run than to de-escalate, better to de-escalate than fight, but better to fight than do nothing. So if you go down that list of things, self-defense is at the very end of that. But the self-defense mindset, I would say, is when you do have to do something, you have to be really switched on. You can't just, you're not sparring anymore. It's
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that's really beautiful the way you describe that, because I think a lot of people, when they think of the self-defense mindset, they think of principally the inner fire that's going to be needed to defend themselves. We often say that a lot of self-defense is mental, and sort of having a switch that you can flick on to release that mental savagery, because as you said, that's going to be really important. It's not going to be sparring. You're going to be going in to win it, or you're going to be losing everything, potentially your life. But I liked how you phrase that, because I think that's so true, that the mindset incorporates much more than that, incorporates these sort of leadership life skills, verbal judo that lands you outside of that situation before it would ever even happen. So what are some of these other skills that you're sort of alluding to besides that sort of mental hardness that's going to really help them get out of a situation?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the person, of course, and it depends a lot on your age. If you're a 20-something-year-old male,
Mhm.
those situations might be a little harder to get out of than a 50-something male or a 50-something female. So I think a lot of what you teach people has to rely on what they're going to encounter.
Mhm.
I am not going to find myself in a situation where I'm at a nightclub at 2 a.m. So those types of situations don't really factor into any training that I do. Can it be something where it's a road rage incident, or where it's you're at a sporting event or a park or a carnival and there's somebody there that's causing problems? So I think just generally the skills that people need depend on the person. Most important, this one thing we always talk about is head on a swivel. Just make sure that you're aware of what's going on around you, especially if you're in a place you don't know. If it's a place you do know, we kind of look at our students and say, listen, do you work late any nights? Do you know what's still open? Do you know where the police station is in that town? Do you know where these things are? Do you know, when and where people are milling about in this area? So that those types of things. I mean, you can always go and look at crime reports, but that's probably just going to freak you out more than it's going to help you. So it's not something I would recommend most people do. Yeah, that's my number one. Number two is just when you see something that's not right, is that you're prepared. So we do hands up. We do hands up with everything. Doesn't matter what we're doing. Just keep your hands up. You're sparring, keep your hands up. We're doing self-defense. Put your hands up in more of a non-threatening way, but have your hands up. And then we actually do this little drill where my wife I'll have my hands down and she'll just try to tap me in the head, and I can't stop her from doing it. But as soon as I put my hands up, she has no chance to do it because my hands are just there. So it's a pretty big eye opener for people usually about just having your hands up. One thing that I really wish we did do more of in class, but we just don't have the class time for it, is verbal de-escalation. Like, what are you going to say to somebody that you don't? And it to me, that all comes down to your ego.
Yeah.
It's how you say it. Like if somebody wants to be a tough guy, you just let them be a tough guy. Like I don't need to fight you. Like,
Yeah.
You're right, I was wrong. I'm sorry. And then one thing I do try to drill into our adults is have a good lie. So you cut somebody off, just say, I'm sorry, I lost my job this morning, whatever it is. I'm sorry, my grandmother passed away yesterday. I'm not thinking straight. Most people are going to be like, oh, sorry, okay, whatever. So have a good lie that you can use that will kind of just de-escalate the situation a bit. If the situation doesn't de-escalate from there, then it's a whole different matter. I mean, that's where it gets into, okay, I need to do something now. And well, one thing I always try to get across to people is that it's okay to hit first if you think there is a problem that you cannot avoid. So if somebody is not letting you get to your car, if they're consistently pushing you backwards and forcing you backwards, you're already in a fight. Just nobody's thrown a punch yet. So I always say it's like a boxing match. Once the bell rings, you're in a fight. Nobody's thrown a punch yet. The fight doesn't start when the first punch is thrown. The fight starts when the bell rings. So you have to understand, in a self-defense situation, when did the bell ring? And am I going to sit here and wait? If two people are backing me up against the wall, am I going to wait for them to do something on the off chance that maybe they're not? Or am I just going to take matters into my own hands at that point?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, well, offense is always faster than defense, and sometimes it's very hard to defend when someone has a very fast offense. And so the best way to counter that is to strike first. Strike hard and show no mercy.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I mean, I think that can go to a dark place if you let it, but I think if you are just pragmatic, that's sort of essential at some level. So Yeah, I totally agree with that. So you were talking a little bit about verbal judo, which is a topic that we actually just had somebody come, Jason Brick came and talked to our students about, and we've had him on the show before and had some really cool things to say about that topic. And it's something that I've always known was important. And I feel like, you know, I've sort of learned verbal judo just by being alive and learning how to socialize and de-escalate, you know, situations, especially as a martial artist. You know, I thought I would need to use my martial arts a lot, but I found out that I never really had to. A few times when there was the unavoidable, but I was never one of those people who said, like, you know, I got in like 30 fights, you know, growing up, because I feel like people who say that, they're looking for fights. If you're really good at de-escalating, that's not going to really happen very much. But even still, you know, I was never taught like a real clear curriculum on de-escalation. And I think very few really exist because it's such a nuanced topic. Like, I could say this, and then you kind of need to say that. And I could say this, and then you need to say that. And if we put all those A's and B's together, it would be like 3 billion, you know what I mean? And so you can't really like curriculumify it too much unless you do something more top down, which is like, you know, okay, take a deep breath and, you know, try to rephrase the question like this, or like you said, you know, come up with a good lie. Those are, you know, kind of, you know, curriculum nuggets that you can kind of put together. But it's always a challenge, especially when the people who are being picked on, who are coming to you to learn self-defense, don't typically have very good social skills to start out with. So you're trying to take somebody who doesn't have good social skills and teach them how to be extremely nuanced with their socialization so that they can de-escalate that violence. So all of that said, leading me to the question that I wanted to pose to you, what are some of these, you know, curriculum nuggets that we can teach people to kind of help them develop better socialization, especially those that may not be, you know, the most proficient socializers, if I can use that word 4 times in a row?
Yeah, that's difficult because now you're trying to change somebody's personality, and that's it. I mean, some people just aren't very good at talking. Some people are very shy, and that's kind of the worst thing that can happen, is that you become meek when somebody is threatening you, whether you know what you're doing or not. And if you kind of shell up a little bit, that's just going to egg them on even more. So it's difficult to come up with something. So the way we approach it, and again, I wish we did more with this, but at time constrictions during class kind of you have to pare down somewhere. So a lot of the things we'll do will work into the drill. So if we're doing a drill that's just, you know, 2 palm heels, an elbow, and a knee on pads, you work in the initial touch with your hands up. So you're like, okay, this person has touched you, you back up a little bit, and you're like, hey, what's going on? You know, you say whatever it is you're gonna say to them, whether that's the lie, or I stole this from Ian Abernathy, but if I'm going to hit somebody first, I'll say something that I have planned and just kind of fling my hands to the side and then just come with a hit. So I have a specific line that I say. I won't say it here because then if anybody ever attacks me, they'll know exactly what I'm going to do when I say the line. But yeah, so you can work those things into the drills you're doing. Yeah. It's a little tougher with kids. I'm more about like, be confident. And a lot of the times with the kids, if there is somebody, we haven't run into this too often where people are getting physically bullied. I just get them loud. So just, even if it's just saying, what is your problem? Being able to say it and go, what's your problem? So other people turn around. So that there's other things. There's just you're saying it confidently. You're not going, what's your problem? You want it to be confident, you want it to be loud, and you want it to be stern. Like, what's your problem? Or do you have a problem? And then people start looking around, because those are words people aren't used to hearing. So
Yeah.
with littler kids, that's more the road I would take, is draw attention to what's happening more so than with an adult where it'd be like, hey, let's try to end this. Like, sorry, I'm sorry, I didn't see you there. Well, what are you staring at? Hey, I have that shirt at home. It's a really nice shirt. Something to say. And then, like I said, if you need to go into the lie, like maybe you get the one hand push and you're like, all right, comes anywhere near me again, I have to hit him. But I'm gonna be like, listen, my grandfather passed away yesterday. I'm just having an off day. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
One of the things that I've realized, it took me a long time to realize this, and I think a lot of people don't even realize it, is that people are rude a lot of times and they don't even realize they're rude. They're not even trying to be rude, but they didn't learn how to say that in a nice way, or it just came out wrong. And so before we start bumping chests and just taking it to the next level, a lot of times I'll say, like, you're being rude. Like, why are you being rude? And they'll realize, oh, like, like, you're being a jerk. And it's a shock to the system. Like, wow, I didn't realize what I was doing. What I was saying was really rude. Because a lot of people play these sort of passive aggressive games where they say one thing, but they really are jabbing down here. And I find that if you just say, like, this is what you're saying right now to me, they can't play these passive aggressive games with you. And it's those passive aggressive games that go back and forth like this that lead to a constant escalation. And the reason why I'm saying this is because it kind of coincides with what you were saying, where it's just like, be loud, like, just hit the nail on the head. Just go after what's really happening here. Like, are you trying to start a fight with me? Like, that's what it feels like. But yeah, that's a really nuanced topic, and it's one that I think we could go into in a totally different podcast. So maybe we shouldn't get too derailed. Let's see, what's another question we have?
Yes, sir. So that was a little more about the de-escalation, the verbal judo. Coming back to that mindset, whether it's on the floor, whether it's in a self-defense situation, what separates a beginner's mindset from that mindset of an experienced practitioner? This is something that, as I'm out working with students, and something that I feel in myself, often I find myself going, ooh, was I ready for that? Was I really ready for that? And working with the students saying, were you ready for that? It doesn't, I say noodle arms all the time. You have like a noodle body, like, what, you're not locked in. So what are some of those?
Yeah, it's funny because we teach them like proper technique and control and all these things, but when it goes down, that none of that matters anymore. So it's the Gichin Funakoshi line, which is spirit before technique. And I've heard that described as the more aggressive person is more likely to win the fight. So there's several of these sayings that I've heard over the years from different people, which is the person who starts it usually finishes it. Like, there's all these little maxims you can use to understand, like, the difficulty with a beginner is they're either always switched on or always switched off. I think as you do it a little more often, you can become calm until you don't need to be calm anymore. So the Roadhouse line, right? So you be nice until it's time to not be nice anymore. So I think as you progressively do that, so I can just, when I'm doing a drill with pads, I'm just kind of technique focused on it. But every now and then I'll try to get the students, especially the teenagers and up, to no, hit the pad. Like, I want you to almost fail. I want to hear you hitting the pad. And it's funny because if I use the rebreakable boards, I did this last week actually, it just wasn't enough oomph in what we were doing. So I pulled out the rebreakable boards and I said, Kia, when you do it, do something. Every one of them shouted. But if I pull a bag out and say the same thing, they're just like, It's just a very different mindset. But the board changes their mindset. So
Yeah.
I think if you can switch somebody on to pads, I think that those are the best way to get that aggression out, because you can kind of move them away from the body, but they're still pretty simulated to a head. So if you can get people to really just on pads, I think you can get them to be able to switch on when they need to. It's the people who can never switch on that I always worry about. Like, if something did happen, I don't know if that person could do anything because they're just too nice.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
That's the best endorsement of board breaking I've ever heard. You know, people are always like, well, why do you do board breaking? Board's not going to fight back. But it's like, there's a lot of things I could say why board breaking is important, but I feel like that right there was amazing, because it's like,
Yes, sir. Yes,
it
sir.
really does force you to switch your mind on, because if you don't, you're going to hurt your hand and you're not going to break it. But if you go 110% and you do everything you got, you're going to break it. And it's just like staring you in the face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With the little kids, I'll leave, like, I make them wear sparring gloves when they do the board breaking, the littler kids, because their hands just, and I almost want them to fail a lot. I like want them to struggle through a board, because you can see them not getting mad, not getting frustrated, but understanding, okay, I just need to be more intense when I'm doing this.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we definitely try to push the limits with our board breaking as well.
Yes, sir.
So that kind of takes me to when I think about the self-defense mindset, like, I really think about that inner fire. I mean, of course, those other things are important too, and that's, I think, a great thing that you have brought to the conversation, and
Yes,
I'm
sir.
going to think a lot more about that. But you know, in karate and taekwondo, we like to tell the story of the soiling, which is that, you know, it's kind of a, you know, mythical story, but that there was a white belt and it slowly became a black belt over time by acquiring blood, sweat, tears, grime off the mats. And so, you know, like when it got really sweaty, it became yellow. As it got moldy, it got green, brown. Now it's getting really dirty, and finally it becomes black. And that is to teach us to have that inner fire, that the sort of seed of darkness that we have to release at a time of need to really be able to defend ourselves. But then, you know, as the white belt fades over time, revealing that white cotton core, it reminds us to pile over innocence and gentleness, so that I'm not walking around like a wolf. We're a sheepdog. We live amongst the flock. We're kind and gentle, but in the time of need, we can defend the flock. And I think that kind of mindset is really important to develop. Like you said, there's a lot of people out there who they're great technicians, actually. They've been training a long time. Like, sometimes they've been training for half a decade, maybe even a decade, and they can do all the kicks. They can put it in the right places. They can do great punch and have good form, but they're not going to be able to defend themselves, because the person on the street is a mad dog and they don't have it in them to be a mad dog. And how do we teach that? How do we teach that inner fire?
Yeah, it's that's the, I don't even know if that's a teachable thing. I think it's something you can improve on. You can slowly improve on that by giving them more and more. Sorry about my dog over here. There must be a delivery in the neighborhood. Giving them more, especially people that don't have that mindset. Like, there's people who have just that mindset where they can just go.
Yeah.
And those people, you actually have to rein in a little bit.
Yes, sir.
The people without the mindset, you have to push them, but you can't break them. So the way you train other people would be to, you know, push them to their limits. But I find that most of the people that aren't looking for trouble ever and don't want trouble and are a little panicky about it, push them just past their comfort zone. So especially adults, I mean, you see it on their first day. If you do a gripping drill, you can't do that with an adult on their first day most of the time, because they're not used to having somebody on them like that. And even once they get used to that, you see there's like this really weird, it looks like me dancing. It's really bad. So they're too far away, like it's very robotic. And then over time, they might start getting a little closer and closer. And then, you know, 2 weeks later, you might say, hey, we're going to do that drill again. And then when you grab the back of their, give them a collar tie, you pull them down a little bit,
Mhm.
just a little bit. And you just get them more and more used to it. It's a slow process to get people used to being close.
Mhm.
I
That
mean, we
is
do
such,
Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and it's, you see people the first day, they're like, nope, not for me.
yeah. Well, that's a big problem, I think, and this is going to give me a little sidetracked, but Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is very trendy right now. A lot of people are going to do it, but very few people feel comfortable in that situation. So they go, they try, they bounce off, and they say, martial arts isn't for me, and they never try anything else. And really, there's a great school right next door that's going to get them to that point where they can handle that intensity. But they just got to give it a try. They got to start at a different place. And most people just aren't honest enough with themselves to say, look, I'm just not ready for this, but I can do this. And if I do this long enough, eventually I'll get to that place where I can go to the ground and put my face in someone's crotch for 10 minutes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we actually, we did a seminar recently, and there was a woman, she's like, I think one of the top highest ranked female black belts on the East Coast. And she starts, so this is a seminar with mostly karate people. And she starts it with saying, listen, there's going to be some super uncomfortable stuff. There's going to be put in very compromising situations. If anybody has any trauma, feel free to sit it out. If you're doing something and it feels weird, sit it out. No one's going to look at you. It's very strange. So I understand why. And then you, like you said, people see that, or they see, they go to a Muay Thai facility and they're like, whoa, I am not ready for this. I'm not doing this. And they just assume that that's how all martial arts are. So there is something to be said for the slow build of taekwondo, of karate, of different martial arts, as opposed to the, okay, first day you're down on the ground in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, or you're taking leg kicks in Muay Thai. So
Well,
there's
I think that's,
different arts.
I mean, that's what we're trying to accomplish here. And it sounds like you're doing a similar thing over there. It's like, you know, we start where people start and we help them achieve the best possible result for them. And, you know, so in our program, we start out with more of the striking, and we start with light contact striking. And then we, you know, learn how to fall. We learn how to throw. We learn standing joint manipulations. This is stuff that people are much more comfortable with. And then we go to the ground, and then we increase the power, you know, over time as you go from the beginner class to the advanced class. And, you know, a lot of times people bump up to the intermediate class and they say, whoa, this is an athletic class. Before it was more intellectual. Now I'm like, I'm huffing and puffing, and I feel like I need to get in shape to handle this class. But that's what we want, because those that stick around, and most do, you know, end up bumping up to the next level, and then the next level, bumping up to the next level. I think that's, in my mind, the best approach that we can have. We might not get everyone, but you know, that's, no one's perfect, and no system can be.
Yeah, so we have all these belts. So the way I always look at it as, you should have accumulated something at the previous belt. So just our regular sparring guidelines. There's an under 8 one, which is basically you guys are rarely going to touch each other. Then there's, you know, 9 to 12s, and there's teens, and each one is progressively different. So white belts, I don't want you hitting anybody. If we're doing sparring or anything, it's either going to be like a game. We'll use chip clips or belt tags, something like that. Or we're going to just do shadow sparring. I want to see how you move. Can you control yourself fighting yourself in the mirror? Because if you can't do that, I don't want to put you in with anybody else. And then a yellow belt, and each belt has a different, okay, we're going to start, here's your square. Here's where you're allowed to hit. The most important thing is you don't hit outside that square. And then as you go on, so we don't do typical point sparring. So as you go on, you add in light leg kicks, touch to the head. And then by the time you get to a certain level, so our brown belts that tested recently, it's like, okay, see that junior black belt, take him to the ground and submit him. And that's part of your test. So at that point, okay. And they're just like, yeah, okay, whatever, we do that all the time. But I couldn't do that with a purple belt. Like, I couldn't say, hey, wrestle that person to the ground.
Mm,
They'd be like, huh? They'd be like, what do you mean? So
mm,
we do it more as a fun thing in class. So we'll do like a sweep single in class because they like just picking the person's leg up,
mm.
and it's just fun for them to do. So then once they get to a point where it's like, hey, remember that thing we did way back when? Now I'm going to show you how to take the person down and hold them down.
Mhm.
So that's more how I look at the building people up throughout, whether you call it sparring or fighting, whatever you want to call it. How do we bring them from 0.0
Mhm.
up to hopefully 0.5 out of 10?
Yeah.
Some people can get to 10. Some people just are never going to get to 10.
So, yes, sir.
So we talked a little bit about building that self-defense mindset. How important do you think that self-defense mindset is to self-defense? If you had to weigh, I know this is really difficult for me to say like an exact number, but if you said like, okay, how much is technique and how much is aggression in a self-defense situation? Because you had alluded to before, like, you know, that aggression is really important. And I agree, that's really important. And I'd almost say that aggression and physical fitness are a huge part. And technique is, it's really hard for me to put an exact number on these things, but it is actually kind of a smaller part. But there's so much to ability in the small part that it can overwhelm this over here. But you have to be so proficient and really understand how the martial arts goes together to be able to like overcome. Like, for example, if you are like a 5'5" person and you want to take down a 6'5" guy who is been in the Marines or something, you've got to be really freaking good. And you have to be reasonably fit and have a reasonable intense mindset. And anyway, I'm basically answering the question before I throw it out there. So let me get your opinion.
Yeah, so there's another Ian Abernathy thing is a hierarchy that he does, and it's mindset, strategy, technique, kit, meaning like tools that you're using. I feel like I'm forgetting one. But basically mindset was his bottom of that pyramid. That's the thing. So he explained it really, really well. It was, I'm more afraid of an aggressive person with a brick than a timid person with a gun who doesn't know how to use it. So he said, like, all those things that, like, hey, that person has a gun. He's like, I'm more afraid of that guy over there that's frothing at the mouth that's holding a brick than that guy who's trying to figure out how to use the gun. So technique comes in, but I think it's the technique you train. So are you training for self-defense or are you training for sparring? Because sparring's a little different. You have a lot more techniques you can use. You can pull out some crazy stuff. For self-defense, basically it's like 4 or 5 things. There shouldn't be a lot of stuff that you have to think about because there's going to be a quick reaction. Once you have the reaction, I think that's where your techniques come in. So you cover and crash in and you grab onto the guy. Okay, now all the stuff you know comes into play. And based on all your hours at the dojo, like, oh, his head's right there. I feel like I can push it down. His arm's there. I'm going to lift it up and over. However you're going to do it. I'm just going to knee him, whatever it is. You know from your experience in the dojang, that here's what I do in this situation. But getting to that situation in a self-defense scenario is a little different than in sparring. Like in sparring, you can kind of weave your way in and be like, oh, I really want to work on this technique today. Where in self-defense, 2 things that I do in self-defense, and really the only 2 things I want my adults to do is be able to cover and crash. So however that is, for me, I put my hands up like almost like a rhino horn and just head into the person. Smaller people, most women, I'll just have them like cover their head and shoot their hand up towards the throat. So they drop their head and shoot up. Once you get to that, now all of your training comes in. But if you don't get to that specific point, you tend to get overwhelmed because I mean the people who are doing street violence are really good at it.
Mhm.
Yeah, they couldn't spar you. You wipe the floor with them, but they're really good at distracting you and punching you in the side of the head. So how do I protect against that so that I can get to my techniques?
Sir.
The thing that I noticed, so I said I didn't get in many fights, but I did get attacked, jumped by 3 guys one night, and I was really surprised because they were very aggressive, which is not surprising. I mean, that I think is very surprising, but they were really bad at fighting, and they just, you know, that classic step in haymaker that like you practiced when you were a white belt, like way back in the day, and everyone said, oh, then no one will ever attack you like that. That's how every single one of these guys attacked me. And I don't know if you've ever held a board for like somebody who thinks they're like a super tough kind of like, I don't want to use like a bad word, like a gangster or something like that. But you, like sometimes we'll do these board breaks and some guy will come up and he's like, yeah, I can break that board. And he's like, yeah, hold it for me. And man, he does like this. He's just like this really bad punch, but it's really strong, you know, and he'll like miss the board, hit me in the hand. And I'm like, like, okay, yeah, you have a lot of power, dude, but you got to like get control, like go straight in, you know? That is literally how people will attack you on the street, but they will attack you really, really aggressively. Fortunately, the best solution to that was a jab side kick every single time. And these guys are just getting the wind knocked out of them left and right. Because when you go like that, you're just, your whole body is open. But anyway.
Yeah, I call that the adrenaline punch. So even in anytime you see professional fighters, when they're actually fighting, like something happens after a match, they turn into little kids. They start, I mean, you watch boxers, they start grabbing each other, trying to wrestle each other. You see wrestlers just start swinging those wild punches because their brain's not thinking anymore. So once your adrenaline really kicks in, and in your situation, I'll assume that the 3 were pumping themselves up just before, so their adrenaline was already kicked in. So now they're not thinking, they're just going on complete instincts. And unfortunately, everybody's instincts is horrible fighting.
Yeah.
Like usually it's kind of some kind of weird hammer fist, or like you said, that total arm punch that comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So
well,
it's
the point I'm trying to make here too is, you know, I think typically the person who's going to attack you on the street is mentally very aggressive, probably fairly fit, but probably doesn't know much about actually fighting. Because if they did, they would have to learn to control their fighting in most places. Now that's changing a lot, I think, with the MMA culture and stuff, which I don't really like. But classically, if you had a bad attitude and you want to learn how to fight, you had to like put on the funny pajamas, say yes, sir, and learn discipline and respect. And so that would kind of curtail that. But if you do end up with somebody who has the physical ability and knows the technique and has the mental aggression, then you really better know your stuff.
I've actually said that in class many times, where I'll say if somebody's throwing a jab cross at you straight down the pipe, you're in a lot of trouble. You should realize right away that this is bad. Or if we're doing a collar tie, and I said if somebody's jamming their elbow into you as they're pulling your head forward, you're in a lot of trouble because this person knows what they're doing.
I saw a YouTube video a long time ago of like some guy in like, I don't know if it was Thailand or where, but he took out like an entire police precinct with like jab crosses. Like they're like streaming out of the police station, and he's like takes out like 20 guys. He's just like boom, 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 and like backstepping and taking them out. Like it was just amazing. And like that's what happens when you combine like that triple threat. You know, it's just like.
But to your point, most people don't know how to fight. I would say that they probably have one practiced move that they're really good at. So I mean, if unless it's their first time out committing street violence, they've done it before, and they probably have one practice move. So if you can thwart that initial practiced move, then that's also going to ramp up their adrenaline even more, because they're like, whoa, that didn't work.
Yeah.
What do I do now? And they might just start swinging and flailing, and hopefully you're still in check enough that you can keep your punches fairly decent. I mean, everybody, once your adrenaline's going, your fine motor skills are gone and you're just swinging. But hopefully that if you practice enough punching straight, that when the adrenaline goes, they're at least there, not all out here.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
So my thought there, you know, when you're in that situation and defending yourself, you know, the adrenaline is pumping, training to that point, you know, continuing to train, like, okay, we want to get to the point where even when the adrenaline's pumping, we're straight enough. The question here is, when somebody is training, it's a little bit of a different question from before. How can the practitioner know when they have the mindset necessary to do what they need to do? So before, the question was, you know, what's the difference between a beginner and somebody who's experienced? This question is, you know, I'll take myself for example. When I step out onto the mats, or when I, you know, go to my car tonight, you know, this is much more of a philosophical question, but where is that awareness? Where does that sit? And how can we talk with our students about that? Like, okay, like, I can see that you are getting this.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the only way to know is to be in the situation, right? That's the difficult aspect of all of this. I would say that the best thing you can do is put yourself in a very bad situation in training. So a lot of times, like if you're a stand-up striker and you're going against somebody who's not at the same level, you're toying with them, but you're being super nice. So sometimes those are the people that are a little unorthodox, that you actually go, you know what? I'm actually not gonna use the right side of my body. So I'm gonna leave it there like I am, but I'm not gonna use it. And or if you were wrestling with somebody, let yourself get into a really bad spot and try to get out of it. And you should, if it's a truly bad spot, you should fail eight or 9 times out of 10. But that panic that you have of, oh my God, I'm in a really bad spot right now. What am I supposed to do? And you're fighting. So typically what happens with me in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, if somebody's better than me, which is most people, once they get the choke on, I don't even really need to be choked too much. And I'm just like, yeah, good job. But if I let myself get into a more compromising spot with somebody who's smaller or not quite as skilled as me, which is very few people, I'm really going to cement that point. I will fight the choke more, just so much. And eventually, sometimes you'd still tap out. And other times you're like, oh, wait a minute, I can actually fight through that. That's what it feels like to fight through a choke. But I'm not going to do that with the instructor, because it feels like a clamp on you. So it's like immediate, okay, I'm done. But somebody who's not good is more like somebody on the street, somebody who grabs you from behind and maybe tries to choke you. It's not just going to be a nice cinched up choke. It's going to be horrible. It's going to be like a air choke and not a blood choke. Yeah. And it's going to be all kinds. So if you can figure out like, okay, I need to turn now I can fight through. And a lot of times what I do in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu classes, I look at where their other hands are, where my hands are, thinking about the striking, not doing it, but going, okay, if I was in this spot, this guy would just be wailing on me right now. So I need to get out of this spot. So I think anytime you can pressure test it in any way, and putting yourself in a really bad spot with somebody who's unorthodox, like maybe, okay, I'm just going to use head movement in this sparring round against this person. I'm going to get hit 10 times because it's not something I do, but I'm seeing all of these punches are coming at weird angles. This is very different. I mean, I'm going to learn from working with people who are not as skilled as I am, but I'm not going to be able to have a really great round. Like so how do I get the most out of this round and let them work a little bit? Is I'll okay, yeah, okay. I'm not even going to defend my stomach here. I'm just going to be up like this the whole time. So you see if the person goes to the stomach. And funny enough, most people still try to punch you in the head because that's just the way they are.
So,
Just kind of agreeing with what you're saying there, and something that came to mind is, you kind of know if somebody has the mental resolve to defend themselves if you can pair them up with the most aggressive, least coordinated person who you've been working on trying to get that aggression down a little bit so they're not hurting people in the class. And even if whether they win or lose, the match doesn't matter. If you can put them with them and they don't complain and they sit back down, you're like, okay, that person's got what it takes. But if you put them with that person, they're like, I'm never sparring that person again. That person's never going to be able to defend themselves in the street.
Yeah.
And another thing too, like in the grappling, like, if you feel like if someone's just squeezing the life out of you, like they got pressure on you and they're just squeezing life out, and you say, I just give up. I just give up. And you're not going to be able to finish up. Like you have to reach deep. You got to reach deep and find the strength somewhere inside of you to keep fighting forward. Now, at some point, everybody will start to have that experience, but it shouldn't come very often. If it's coming a lot, then you need to learn how to increase that fire inside of yourself.
Yeah, I see it in our sparring class. So most of the our grappling class. So most of the kids in it are teens. It's mostly like 7 or 8 teens. They're like brown belts and up in our systems. Now they're doing jujitsu too, adding that in. And you can see there's one kid in particular who will fight through anything. And my younger son is like that too. And if both my sons are fighting each other, then they both fight through anything. But yeah, so you see certain people who just have that mindset, like, no, I'm not. It's like sometimes I'm just like, just tap out. And they're like, no. It's like, just tap out. And then other people, like, I'm more like, just, you know what, I'm older. So I'm just like, yeah, I'm good. I'm good with that. Every now and then, like I said, I like to fight through it just to keep that mentality, like, no, you can fight through this. I think that's something I've heard before in the past too, is they were talking about, they were doing like a gun training thing, and every time somebody got hit, they would just like sit down. And he's like, no, fight through it. He's like, I've seen people get shot 6, 7 times and they just keep coming forward. But he said a lot of people will get shot and they just immediately go, oh my God, I'm shot, I'm dead. And they just drop down when actually, they're not dead. They'll be fine. They're just going to get stitched up. So it is a matter of, okay, can I fight through this thing? Or am I just going to be like, you know what, this is too much?
Yeah, no. So what I'm saying, like, yeah, I agree. And I think it's a nuanced thing where you want to teach them to have inner fire and to be indomitable. But at the same time, you also don't want them to like get a super big ego where they can't lose. And I think where I kind of draw the line is like you were talking before, like when you go up against really good people, you just tap out, right? I used to play bumper pool back when I was in college, and we'd go to one bar, and there was this guy there who was like the legend of bumper pool, and we loved playing with him. And this guy, when you got to a high level of skill, he would just be like, if the ball got close to the hole, he would just tap it in because he respects you. Be like, yeah, you got it, man. You got it. Like, you don't need to try. And that's kind of how I feel with submissions, and it's kind of what you were talking about, like against good people. If they have it lined up and everything's right, yeah, man, this guy's got it. He's got it. But what I'm talking about is like, let's say I'm on top of you, I've like passed your guard, and I'm putting pressure down on top of you. You just be like, oh, I give up. I can't handle it. Like it's just too. I'm sure if you've done a lot of wrestling, you've had the experience where it's like, oh, I can't. Like I give up, And that's where you have to fight. Not necessarily fighting when the guy's got the arm bar like all locked up and perfectly tight, and he's coming. Like that kind of fighting is kind of stupid because that's how you get hurt. They don't fight like that. If they have it like locked up and perfect and they're going for it, you just tap out, and that's how you show that you're an experienced veteran. Like, yeah, I tap out to that kind of stuff. So that's kind of how I do it. I don't know if that's how you do it, but
yeah, that's a really good distinction between the two things, because so you can tap because you're about to be submitted, whether that's some type of joint lock or a strangle, or you can tap because something hurts. So if you constantly are tapping because something hurts, like sometimes I'll be
That's too late.
rolling with people and I'll be like, they'll tap and I'll be like, well, what'd you tap for? And they're like, that was really uncomfortable. Like even just passing a guard sometimes when you get your knee onto their thigh or something like that. Knee on, I've seen people tap from knee on belly. I've had really bad ones and I can understand why. It's a horrible position. But it's when you get into that position and you immediately, like, I think what you're saying is you get to a position and before the finishing blow or the submission has even happened, you're already tapping. You've just
it's
given
legit
up.
and it's all locked up and the person's going for it and it's beyond, like, okay, let's say I'm doing an arm bar and I have it here. I'm not going to tap. But if you get my arm bar like right about here, dude, there's no way I'm pulling it back. And before it gets to here, and that's from here to here is going to go in like 2 seconds, I'm going to tap. Like, okay, you got it. Like, because there's no hope. And anyone who's fought arm bars before knows that like here, if it's outside 90, it's like, it's just, there's no hope basically. And I can feel it coming and I know it and I just have experience. And it's like, okay, that's not worth fighting. But if somebody comes in, all those white belts that come in, they start squeezing your head. Like, I'm never tapping to that. Like, that's not a legit move, man. I'm not going to tap to that. Like, and I will fight it until I get cauliflower ear. I'm not going to tap to that.
I know exactly what you're saying because that is a thing where it's like, okay, you don't know what to do. I don't blame the white belt when they do that because they're like, I don't know what to do here. I know you showed me an arm bar 2 weeks ago, and other than that, I don't know anything. So yeah, they just kind of squeeze your head, and there is something in me that says the same thing. Like no matter how much it hurts, I'll be like, I can't tap to this because it's not a legit move. And to what you were saying, I think the people who like, so you get past their guard and you see them deflate, they've already given up before anything bad has even happened to them, just because they've lost a position and they're like, oh no, here we go again type of attitude. I think those are the people that really need that slow build. They just need to know, like, sometimes like it'll just be, no, keep fighting. Just keep fighting. Tell them what to do. Even just, shrimp on your side. No, not that side, the other side. And you just keep going through it with them. And then eventually they start to understand, okay, that this isn't the end of the world. I can recover from this position.
Well, like so many things in life, it's a slow building up of confidence. Confidence isn't like, oh, I just figured something out and now I'm confident. It doesn't work like that. It's like work ethic or something. It's like, you don't just like, now I'm hardworking. Like, you just try to add like an extra 30 minutes every day to your time at the office, and then slowly you working more and more and more. Same thing with, your confidence. Like, you put yourself into a situation that's really pushes your limits, but not too far that you get burned. We say 1 foot in the fire, keep 1 foot in the fire. Because if you jump in with 2 feet, like, and then just get annihilated, you're going to get traumatized and you won't be able to go, you'll go backwards. So instead, push it to your limit and a little bit further, and then go back and try it again and just keep doing that and build up that resolve until you can handle it.
And that's something that can happen to advanced people too. So a friend of mine, we were talking a couple months ago and we were talking about sparring. And he said one of his students one time, really great point sparrer, got sidekicked right in the ribs. And he goes, just totally lost everything. Couldn't fight at all anymore. He goes, so at the dojo, I was like, you know what? He's like, put this chest protector on. And he goes, he wore it for over a year. And then like a year later, he's like, hey, you probably don't need that anymore. And the guy was back to normal. But it took even somebody, this was like a black belt level competitor. It took that person, when they got kicked, they just couldn't deal with it anymore. And they had to rebuild. And it was a slow process of, yeah, just put this on. Sometimes it's just a mental thing, almost the Adam Sandler movie Big Daddy with the sunglasses, right? Oh, you're invisible now. It's almost the same thing. Yeah, you don't want to lie to people. You don't want to build up a false sense of confidence. So I think that can be even more dangerous. but you do need to nurture them more than a lot of people. Toughen them up is something you'll hear a lot. You got to toughen up, and it's like, no, you just need to nurture that person and make sure that they're comfortable with what they're doing.
That's such a true statement. I feel like everyone says, like, toughen up, but it's almost like if you say that, you don't really understand how you become tough, because you don't become tough like by just saying, get tough. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
No,
it'll work for 1 out of 10 people, and you can point to it and go, yeah, see.
Well, it will work if you make them into a feral animal. Like if you
Yeah.
just keep shaking them until they just like, I can't handle it anymore. It's like the kid who shuts down. Like you say, like, say yes, sir, say yes, sir, say yes, sir. And the kid just like, no, sir. Like he just like shuts down, right? That's what will happen. If you push, like get tough, get tough, get tough, get tough. Eventually they'll become like a feral animal and they will just be like uncontrollable. But that's not really tough. It's a fragile toughness. And what we try to do at our school is it's like building a good blade has a lot of carbon in it, so it's flexible. It can be really strong, but it can also be really brittle if you just toughen that way. And what I mean by that flexibility is you have the ability to socialize with other people and integrate with society. Because if you get tough like that, you're actually going to become like a wolf, and then you won't fit in with the crowd, and you'll get more bullied, even though you're super tough.
Yeah, it's a quiet confidence. You see it in certain people. Like you meet somebody and never talk about martial arts, never talk about, but you can just look at them and go, that's not somebody to be trifled with. There's just that they have a look on their face, not of anger or aggression, but I am confident. It's just a certain look. I usually say it about the way people walk. You can tell a lot about a person's athletic skill by the way they walk. And you can see, like, that person moves really well. That person has, eyes up, kind of chin down a little bit. You're like, that person probably has taken some stuff and knows how to fight. And you can just see on their face, like, no, I've done this before. And how they act when things start to escalate. So before it escalates into a fight, you can see people who are, they might just start looking over in that direction. Other people are like, oh my God, what's going on? And you just see a difference in how people react when things start going sideways.
Yes, sir. So that actually takes me to the last question I wanted to bring up. And the way the self-defense mindset manifests not in a self-defense situation, not on the mats, just day-to-day activities. That's one example, right? You find yourself in a situation where, maybe you hear a noise outside. One person might go, what was that? Right? Like, and really start immediately freaking out. Their anxiety shoots up, whatever it is. And you might say, well, let's go take a look, right? Like, and are there examples of that you've seen? And can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean that goes to everything. Anytime you're gonna panic, so a pipe in your house bursts.
Sir.
You'll see some people will run and start running around, grabbing a mop, grabbing a bucket, and other people are like, "Where's your water? Shut off." They're just keeping a level head throughout the situation. So yeah, I think that goes to everything. It goes to your work. When the boss criticizes your work, are you the person that's gonna escalate the situation and make it worse? Well, you were supposed to have Zach help me, and then you took him away for a different project. Or are you just going to go, oh yeah, I've been working on it. We'll definitely get it done in time. Like, do you have the ability to verbally de-escalate those situations? And a lot of times it's something you already said, which is it's almost like a false strength, a false toughness. When people are unable to just take a step back and go, okay, we need to remain calm here. Yeah, your boss is going to yell at you. That doesn't mean the appropriate thing, just because you think you're right, is to yell back or argue the point. Sometimes it's just, yeah, you know what? Yeah, it was supposed to be done Tuesday. I'm really sorry about that. I'll get to work on it.
Yes, sir.
And that's the end of the situation. And then if nothing comes of it. But yeah, I mean, anything that can happen in life where you freak out. It's a lot of times, it's actually a situation at the dojo that has really nothing to do with martial arts. During the teen class, one of the kids came over and he's like, my foot's kind of bothering me. So I was like, okay, something happened, and sat him down, and you could see he's a hockey player, so he's used to being banged up, but he's also not wanting to be injured because he doesn't want to miss things. Yeah. So I said, okay, so where is it? And he's like, oh, in warm-ups, so-and-so kind of stepped on my foot when we were shuffling around. I'm like, okay, and looking at it, and you could see he's starting to get a little upset. And I was like, listen, let's not worry about anything till we have something to worry about. Let's see what's going on. I'm like, bend your toes. Okay, you bended them fine. I started squeezing. I'm like, does it hurt more? Is it the same? He's like, it's the same. And I was like, well, that's a good thing. So then it was just more of, okay, do you want me to call your parents, have them come get you? But it was just being able to walk him off of the cliff, where he's like panicking that, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to play the sports I play. I'm going to miss this thing. I'm going to miss that thing because I broke my foot. Where it's more like, let's worry about what we need to worry about right now. And
yes, sir.
Not
get ahead of ourselves, not jump to conclusions.
That's so interesting. My father's a doctor, and he told me once, like, one of the reasons why, they feel your lymph nodes and check your heart and look in your ear and all this kind of stuff is, it's not just because they want to see those things. It's because they want to, that bedside manner puts you at ease and calms you down. Like a lot of times when you, like a student gets hurt exactly like you're describing, and if I don't address the situation, it's going to get worse, right? And of course, the parents see that, they think I'm negligent. But if you look at it and you say like, well, does this hurt? And all this kind of, it's like, you're not a doctor. Like, you don't know what the heck like that means. If his if it curls his toes and that hurts, like, oh, well, now that means that you have this kind of fracture versus that. It's like, you have no idea what you're talking about. But by saying that, you're putting him at ease, and so yeah, I agree. That's really important.
And it's just let me get you an ice pack. Come over, sit over here. Just the school nurse routine, right? Like, it's just, I'm not going to make a big deal of it, because if I start going, oh my God, look at your toe, it's like half sideways, then obviously everyone's gonna, and everyone else is gonna stop too and be like, whoa, what happened? So it's just kind of like, okay, all right, well, let's come over here. No matter how bad it is, like unless, the bones poking through the skin, then it's kind of evident what's going on. But sometimes I know, like, oh yeah, that's not an injury. Let me find some wood here. We haven't had any like serious injuries. Closest was my son blocking a kick with his arm.
Oh, did he break it?
No, and I don't know how, because his arm went like this.
Oh God.
And it moved, and I was like, oh, good thing you're a kid and you're flexible. But bones aren't supposed to move like that. Yeah, so but like, okay, yeah, you just really messed up your toe or something. Even then, it's like, okay, you're gonna be all right. Just if you need to sit down, go ahead and sit down. Most of the time, that's what they'll do. They'll just on their own. But I always want it to be like, okay, we're not gonna panic here. No matter how bad things get, we need to stay in control. We need to understand where everyone is.
Your voice has so much effect on other people. Like those like the mirror neurons or whatever, like we kind of read from each other and we kind of interact that way. If you go, I don't know if you ever had this experience, but when I was a kid and I got kicked in the head at a tournament, my master came up, are you okay? Are you okay? I would be fine. And then I would go, yeah, man. I couldn't control it. Like I would just lose it, because he's worried, then I get worried. But if he comes over and is like, you're all right. Like, and then my master wouldn't tend to do that. Because he knew this, my mom would come over and she wouldn't know that. So she'd be like, are you okay? Blah, blah. And my master would be like, no, like, don't do that, because you're, like make him like devolve, because just be calm and be like, let me see what's going on there. No, you're all right. I think, I think you can keep going.
Yeah, take a second. You okay? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that a lot at tournaments. So you'll have certain ring judges who are really good at that, like controlling the parents when
Yeah.
something hits where it's not supposed to hit. But
Yeah.
they're really good at just being like, okay, you're gonna be fine. Okay, let's stand up, put your arms above your head. Like you said, for what? Like, is that really gonna? It supposedly helps, but I mean, if you get kicked in the groin or right in the right in the stomach and your wind's knocked out of you, it's not going to do too much immediately, but it's taking your mind off of things. It's just kind of settling, like, oh, this person knows what they're talking about. He wants me to put my arms up. That makes no sense to me as a kid, so it must be doing something.
I can't,
Yeah.
I can't tell you after 3 decades of doing martial arts how many times I think I broke something and I didn't. Like you get hit, I'm like, oh, I surely broke it this time. Like I broke it and then I did. It's just like, it happens all the time. You tend to feel sorry for yourself and you're like, oh man, I'm really limping. This must be really bad. But then like, the next day you wake up and you're like, I'm fine. Like, oh, I was just being a total baby. And being a good coach, you can kind of help because because you've been doing it for so long and you've had so many false positives that you're like, you're okay. Like I can see the way this is going. You're gonna be okay.
Yeah, and then I mean, just I used to play basketball a lot when I was a kid, so I've broken every finger on my hand, and it's just one of those things where if it happens, you're just like, yeah, I'm all right. It's not dislocated, so that's good.
Yeah.
I only had to have one of them rebroken and set.
Sure.
But it happened so many times. I was just like, oh, just broke my finger again. Not a big deal. Because you always get it jammed on a ball or something. My fingers take like left turns now. They go all different directions. But yeah, and then just different things. A couple of years ago, I broke my pinky toe here at home. And I was at the dojo. Yeah, I was limping around and everything, but it's at the dojo. I had a fractured tailbone that took forever to heal. So there's a lot of things I couldn't do, but I was still doing whatever I could. And then every now and then something would come up and I'd be like, well, like, oh, this is hard. This is hard. I'm like, oh, well, you should try doing that with a fractured tailbone. And they're like, huh? And then you can tell the story. It's like, yeah, for the last 3 months that I've been in here doing break falls with you.
Yeah.
That's why you got to do them right.
Yes, sir.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I've broken a lot of things too. It's just, I also know that I've thought I broke something and I really didn't. And
yeah, many times.
To tease that
Pulled muscles.
will help your student. I mean, look, are you like screaming? Like, because if you had broken your arm, you would be probably screaming right now. When you're 5 years old, you have no idea what a broken arm is. I broke my arm when I was 5, and I was screaming, and they had to re-break it in the hospital and stuff because it wasn't fully broken and stuff.
Yeah, that's the thing. So the life experience you have too kind of dictates to the kids like what level of concern they should have in that moment. So even if I know somebody broke their arm or ripped up their ankle, it's not something that we need to have an ambulance rushing down here and everybody panicking and find a defibrillator because we need to there's certain things that are panic situations that are like, no, this needs to happen right now. There are other things where it's like, okay, everybody keep your head level and we'll get through this. It's not going to be pretty, it's not going to be great, but we can get through it. And I think going back to that self-defense mindset, the longer you can keep that level-headedness and your ability to like rationalize what's happening and the better off you are. And so if somebody just starts swinging at you, you're not even expecting it. If you don't have any training, you're going to be panicked the whole time until you're unconscious.
Yes, sir.
If you have some training, you're going to feel that first thing and immediately go, what was that? And just react because you've been hit before. So you're like, oh, okay, I know something just hit me. Where somebody who doesn't do that is not going to know what happened. And I think that's where a lot of the self-defense seminars and things like that, I'm not a super fan of because it does kind of give those people a false sense of confidence because they're doing, maybe they're hitting a pad or something just one time as hard as they can. And somebody's maybe doing a slow push, but that they never have that training of, no, something unexpected just happened. So even when we're training in the dojo drills, the unexpected is not happening there. So you know exactly what I'm going to do, and you're still struggling with it.
Yes, sir.
So it's like, when the unexpected happens, that's where you find out, okay, here's where it matters. And when people don't train, or when they do the one seminar and they're like, oh, if somebody grabs me, I know to just do this. It's like, really? So that's where I kind of have I don't like that self-defense terminology. I mean, you see the YouTube videos and stuff with these 10 self-defense things, and they're just, you're like, nah, that's not actually how that's going to go down. So we've done it in class before. I'll just do the reverse bear hug. Yeah, everybody has techniques for it, but every now and then when I do it, I just immediately pick the person up.
Yes, sir.
And they're like, whoa, how am I supposed to do? And it's like, okay, because that's really what's going to happen. Or if it's just somebody who's more advanced student, you can almost knock them down forward with it. Like they're like, wait a minute, I can't. Yeah, it's not going to be pretty. It's going to be super ugly for the person doing it and you. Like you're not going to look like you do in here when you do a drill. It's going to look really ugly.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I will just say, because we were about to do a self-defense seminar in a few days, and if anyone's watched this, it's going to be coming a self-defense seminar. I don't think that it's totally useless. I will say that, like
We do
you
them
said,
too.
person who is going to attack is going to know, like, maybe one or two techniques really well, and that's their whole game. And if you can just learn like one technique really well, it can be really useful to you. If you know how to do a good palm strike, a good elbow, and a knee, you can dramatically increase your chances of surviving that encounter. And if you just know some really basic concepts of how to escape, like, for example, if someone grabs your wrist, break out between the thumb and the fingers to bring your appendage closer to your body to generate power. These really simple things can really help you. Some basic stabilization, understanding how to stabilize and create balance for yourself so you don't get taken off your feet. It can really help you with just one class. Now, is it going to make you a master of the martial arts? No, of course not. And that's one of the fallacies of movies that drives me crazy. Like the 1 week montage where they go from white belt to black belt. It's like, come on.
Yeah. So when we do our self-defense seminars, very much the same thing. Like, hit the pad now, do it like you mean it.
Yeah.
Just getting them used to, usually hammer fists or palm strikes, usually whatever the person's more comfortable with. The wrist releases, we do that sometimes. It's more, I always try to get across the point, like, this is the principle of it. And this works for any wrist release, but to actually be good at it, you have to practice it.
Yeah.
So it's like, here's the principle you can take away from this.
So, well, I think as well, I mean, that is why this conversation about mindset is so important, because that's another big thing I know we've talked about emphasizing at that seminar is you have to be on, like you have to be aware, you have to know that this is a self-defense situation in the first place.
Well, Sensei Ruddock, we could keep talking forever. And we've really enjoyed having you on, and we'll have to have you back on at another time. But we've taken more than an hour of your time, so I think we should maybe start drawing to a close. Any final thoughts before we wrap it up today, guys?
I think that we could just go on and on about this for sure. And it's such an amazing topic, and something that sounded like at the beginning, both of you had mentioned, there's almost a deficit in this conversation in martial arts schools right now. And so I think it's really important to have these conversations so that our students can see and start to really understand that there's so much more than just you're punching and kicking on the mats. So
yeah, 100%.
Sensei Ruddock, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I would just say that understand what you're training for. So if you're training for self-protection, that you just you're not training to fight other martial artists, understand how that differs from your regular martial arts. So generally with the adults, I tell them, listen, here's the 5 things I want you to learn: how to fall down, how to throw a decent punch, how to keep your hands up, cover and crash, push away, whatever it is. And then everything else we're doing, that's for fun.
Yeah.
So that's the martial arts. That's for fun. Yes, you can use that stuff, but for self-defense, it's more about your mindset and the principles of it, not so much about, oh, look at, I've collected all these different things that I can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Simplicity. Thank you so much for coming on, sir. It's a pleasure.
Appreciate it. It was always a pleasure.
And wishing you the best with your school and everything out there. We'll talk to you again soon.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Sounds good, guys.
If you enjoyed that podcast, please consider liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel, as well as hitting the notification bell. We offer in-person, group, and private lessons at our facility in Kyle, Texas, as well as virtual lessons anywhere in the world. If you'd like to learn more about our programs, you can find us online at risingphoenixtkd.com.